Hello everybody, I'm Nicole from the Haliburton County Public Library, and today we're going to be doing sand painted objects. So here's my example of one. And here's what you're going to need. You're going to need a container to mix this in. You're going to need a tablespoon, a quarter of a cup. You're going to need paint, whatever color you want. You're going to need sand. You're going to need plaster of Paris, which is it's a dry mix. It's in powdered form in the box. You'll need paintbrushes that can hold a fair amount of material on them. And you're going to need a clean glass object. Glass tends to make the best versions of these. And you're going to need water, so I just have some in a kettle. It's not hot, it's just room temperature. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do a single batch of this. It covers enough. It makes about a cup worth of material. I'm going to need a bit more to do this. Okay, so first things first, the sand. So I have an old container. I've taken this off out of my yard and I put it on a cookie sheet and threw it in the oven. The reason being, you want to kill any bacteria or any creepy crawlies that may be in it. So throwing it on a cookie sheet, throw it in the oven, 350, maybe 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how much you have on it. Enough to make everything really hot, and then let it cool. For this, you're going to need the plaster of Paris. You're going to need a quarter of a cup for a single batch. Then you're going to add 2 tablespoons of warm water. So mine's just room temperature, but it works the same. And you're going to mix that up. There is a bump in my container, so I just kind of work it down the sides until there's no lumps. You kind of want it a wet cement consistency, or kind of like if you ever made homemade pudding, and I know this is really gross because it's plaster Paris, that consistency it gets before you put it in the fridge, but after you mix it, that's kind of the consistency you want. So now we're going to add the paint. So you're going to use 2 tablespoons of paint. So I'm going to do this one a weird color, just because I can. And then mix that up so it's all mixed in. Now you're going to add your sand. So as I mentioned, I put this in the oven. I took out anything that was kind of like greenery, so any roots, leaves. I also took out really big rocks as much as I could. You're going to add 4 tablespoons, but I recommend adding 2 at a time, stir, and then add the other 2. The finer mix you have for your sand, the finer texture you're going to get when you do the painting part. So this is now done. You can use this to paint now. So I'm going to make the mix I'm going to be doing for the big jug now. So I am doing a triple batch for this, but I wanted to show you the single batch so that you could do it as you needed. So that's mixed. I'm gonna set this aside and just clean up my measuring cups and that. So I do recommend you do this pretty soon after using them. It dries and it can be pretty hard to get off the utensils afterwards. So I'm going to put down a bag so that none of this gets on my table. You're gonna take the object you're painting and you're going to coat it. So one thing I figured out with the example I did is if you want to be able to put this on something like fabric, don't put any on the bottom. It catches and it kind of pulls and it's just not very good. So I start kind of at the base area and you're just going to kind of scoop it on. It's going to go on pretty thin for the first coat and then you're going to have to do a couple coats after that, but and it is fairly messy, that's why I do have the bag down. Does not take long to coat it at all. You let this dry completely, you'll be able to tell the drier spots get very light. So I'm gonna go rinse out my brushes and I'm going to put a lid or plastic wrap, depending on what you use, and seal your container so that it doesn't dry up on you. So if it's been sitting, just give it a stir. Okay, I'm gonna wait for these to dry. It takes about an hour or more depending on the humidity and temperature in wherever you're doing this. Okay, so as you can see, there's actually like some lighter and darker spots. So that lighter area is actually what's dry and the darker ones are still drying. Mine is taking a while due to the fact there is a lot of moisture in the air because it is raining out. If it does take a while and you want it to dry faster, you can either put a heater by it and blow the heat around it and let it dry, or you can just continuously let it dry like this. Okay, so mine's not completely dry. However, it's dry enough that while I'm brushing on the new coat, it's not going to brush away the first coat. You're gonna have to give your stuff a good stir and then do your second coat. Now, when you do this, you may have some of it running off. So just kind of, you can move your jar out of the pool of stuff that's run off and just allow it to dry. So, depending on, well, how thick it goes on, how good you get it on, all this stuff, you may need to do a third coat. So, I'm just looking at this now, making sure I didn't miss any spots. And I'm thinking a third coat will probably be needed on this one. So I have done a second coat on. It's drying fine. It has a lot more pooling than the other one at the bottom, but I'm not too concerned about that. So I'm just gonna wait for these to dry. Okay, so that's the craft. Thank you for joining me. As you can see, you can do whatever color you want for the paint in them. Purple, brown, black, gray, red, whatever you want. Does take a couple coats and patience when it's damp out. So I will have another craft ready for you next week.